Hello, Gravitrons. Hello, everybody. Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. All right. So I played this game of chess outside of my normal time control. This is game in 10 minutes per side per game, uh, and I was pleased with the results. So let's take a look. E pawn opening. I'm getting my C pawn out there, expecting a fianchetto bishop at B7. So with the C pawn out first, I can protect the E4 pawn by way of knight to C3. All right, exactly as planned. Some book moves. White has amazing control of the center already, but black doesn't care all that much, frankly. This is a wing attack. It's I don't know which one it is. It might be Queen's Indian Defense or whatever it is. It features a fianchetto bishop attacking from the wing against White's control of the center in a more classical, more direct, more romantic even way. Not like you're going on a date. Not necessarily, though. Right? Right? So, White is playing a classic game, and Black is going to attack from the wing, from the sides. This is true of real warfare. Uh, Brigadier General Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, he saved the day at Gettysburg by successfully defending a very difficult against a very difficult attack. Uh, if this is Little Round Top and the Southern armies, the Confederate army men, are attacking and attacking and attacking, Chamberlain and his 52nd Maine were able to defend against that so that the Southerners didn't find their way to the flank. Very important in civil warfare, uh, also important in revolutionary warfare, but especially civil warfare, were flanks. How to try to outflank your opponent, and then you can sort of unseam them like kind of like a zipper from the flank with uh, soldiers fleeing towards this way, and it's off map, but where they would be fleeing towards, you know, this direction. Oops, this direction, this direction, but off map. The army comes apart at the seams when they've been outflanked. So this is more of a Chamberlain thing. Well, no, you can't really say that. That doesn't apply. But we are looking at a classic uh, matchup from the hyper modern ideas of attacking from the flank against the most classical romantic uh, ideas of occupying the center with pawns and have your minor pieces be controlling of some of those squares. All right. So bishop to b4. Black streams in, slides in with this pin against White's c3 knight. I'm not worried about it right now, and in the way that I'm not worried about that right now is because I'll play bishop d3 and still be guarding the e4 pawn. d6, move d6 here I think is maybe too slow. What does black look to accomplish with d6? Maybe guarding against some of White's incursions that couldn't occur from the pawn on the c file or the pawn on the e file. d6 is slow. So instead, we would say develop your knight, but that's not all that great either. Your g8 knight, that is. So perhaps knight to c6. And I said c6. Did I mean c6 or I mean d6? I meant d6, my friends. I said c6, but I meant d6. d6, I guess, is a little slow. But we're already seeing that black is having a little bit of difficulty forming a plan. knight to c6, then you get these shots against that knight with d5, or knight to f6, and then the shots go to e5, but the bishop swoops in to capture on g2 and will capture on h1 thereafter. So I think knight to f6 is the best way for black to play. Well, here it is, the fifth best way for black to play, according to Torch. Torch likes the immediate and bold challenge to the center. Pawn to f5, we've already seen from my opponent that he or they do not wish to challenge the center by way of pawn control. Maybe, who knows? Alright, next up. So d6 was a bad move, and also just more directly a bad move because of queen a4 check, and then even with knight to c6, d6 can't, even with knight to c6 we can boot the knight with, for instance, pawn to d4, captures on e, or captures e to d, captures e to d, and the pinned piece is attacked by a pawn. And there's other variations where if the knight doesn't throw himself in front, like say pawn to c6, and the queen captures the b4 bishop instead. So I did not pick up on that during the game. I instead played bishop to d2, and I was eyeing this weakness on g7 mostly. I would, yeah, I was eyeing the weakness on g7, capturing on c3. C5 is striking at the center, which is the right idea. So we've seen both sides play some lousy moves in the early going here. I didn't play queen a4 check like I should have. My opponent played this slow move d6. I played bishop to c3 at some point. Where did I go? Like I must have gone like that. But my opponent showed that he can lock things up with e5. So nothing catastrophic or disastrous. But here in the early going, there's been a little bit of tomfoolery. I decided to play f4 to open things up. I'm still eyeing this weakness on g7. It's kind of like, it's not what if chess, but it's the pawn on f4 both threatens captures on e5, then if captures on e5, then bishop takes e5, and I'll have netted 2 pawns against 1. Should black's pawn capture on f4, then white has bishop takes g7, sometimes picking up a full rook, or otherwise picking up at least the exchange, but probably picking up the full rook here, to be honest. So this puzzle in the center leaves something for black to figure out. Knight to d7 is a great way to do it, right? Now if I capture, I face this very strong knight implanted, or what's the word, outposted at e5 and protected by a pawn. He can't be harassed by the f pawn because there is no f pawn anymore, and the d5 pawn has gone too far into black's territory to to exert itself on e5. Just some best moves, sorting out some of this with good moves. Computer best moves. Alright, let's take a look. Black has king safety, white has space. Black has clock, white has initiative. White has material, say white also has mobility. So white's doing well. I agree. Torch and I are pretty much on the same page here. 1 point of lead due to material, and then this 1.8 additional pieces of lead. This is due to all those factors, mobility and space and so on, and initiative mostly. Yeah, white's doing well here. The castle's king's side is not all that dangerous because there's no dark squared bishop against my king, and not only that, some of the queen's attempts to make check against white's king are blocked by her own pawns. So castle's king side is strong here. Get the rook onto the f file, and we're now contributing towards some eventual attack on black's king. Bishop c3. Doubling on the f file is sort of like a practical and pragmatic no-brainer. It did take a while to think of this move. What was I thinking? Yeah, so there's a lot of good tempting type moves here for white. Rook to f5 has to be considered with the intentions of doubling with queen to f3 and then tripling with rook to f1. Not only that, we have a pawn that is two moves away from attacking this now very vulnerable f7 pawn. And one of our bishops is streaming into things. This pawn moves, and there's even, a sacrifice of a bishop on h7 with check kind of thing that the king's gonna. White will launch an extreme attack from this position. I'm saying that maybe looking to lead with your queen isn't exactly the way to do that. We see Torch wants just that, rook to f5, put the rook in play, while also keeping the initiative, right? Keep our initiative there. Expose ourselves to back rank checkmates, but still be strong all the while. So one thing that pops out at me here is, what about queen g4? Knowing this move, this is probably not going to work, right? No sound sacrifice is a sound sacrifice. That wasn't quite it, but former world chess champion and grandmaster Mikhail Tal said there's no such thing as a sound sacrifice. But it's interesting. You look at it for a bit. Queen g4, and then if the sacrifice is accepted on d3, is there a follow-up, some way for white, to get into g5 and then h6 and have a mate on g7? The opponent might try to block, but maybe the rook sacrifices itself in a timely fashion to, it's not there. It's just not quite there. But you look at it. You look at this sacrifice that would follow after queen g4. We'll be sure about this. We'll try it. Oh, well, it worked. In terms that Torch liked it. That's actually kind of good. What are we going to do to make this sacrifice? Now I have to figure out how to make this sacrifice work. Maybe rook to f3. So we have this discovered attack on the knight on d7. And black can't adequately cover the rook as well. So let's try that. It's working. What the heck is going on now? Why? Just a second ago, though, I played rook to d3, and the queen jumped onto the rook. I don't know. Now I want to get that line back. There we go. Alright, we captured with the pawn to keep the threat on d7 alive, but what the heck was that? Jordan. I see the discovered threat. I see the discovered attack threat. Don't know my own strength. I first heard that from my math teacher, but I think he was coaching soccer at that point. Like, I don't recall something like he's opening a soccer ball bag and like they drifted. They were thrown way further than he intended. He's like, I don't. Wow. He's like, I don't. When he threw the bags, like, I don't know my own strength. So White's holding on to this computer advantage. Okay, that's a good way to say it. I think actually just Queen H6 is good. Close up this diagonal for as long as we can. A little bit scared about Rook G1 because of the diagonal and the presence of a light squared bishop on my opponent's light squared bishop. This could, point of Rook G1 is to allow for movement for mobility. The queen can now play I can now play Queen H5 without there being the threat of a lost queen due to the pinned pawn. I don't know if that's necessarily the right move for her to go. It seems like it's necessary move. White's doing very well. computers sometimes struggle with this. This is 4 points of material for 3, but now it's queen and against queen and 2 pawns against rook and 3 pawns. Practically speaking, this is gonna be an easier win for most humans, with of course white, than some of the other options that were available. So instead of bishop takes h5, I mean, wouldn't you want to see, if you're black here, wouldn't you want to probably play bishop takes d5 and have a shot against the b3 pawn? You still pick up material, you keep more material on the board. But, you know, from in a computer's thinking, you can't see a win from that, so I'll go for the better material. I don't know. It's not the end of the world, by the way. Right? Definitely not. One thing not to do here for white is step onto the G column. Right, put black in check. Kind of get a beat on where subsequent checks may lead us. So we put the pawn in that middle. You would consider here the sacrifice, the endgame sacrifice, queen f2 check. When the king moves out of the way, you capture the rook, king captures queen, then you say, aha, I'm going to make a queen on d8, but the king is just in the nick of time with king e7, and after pawn to e8 check, or pawn to e8 equals queen check, the king on e7 captures d8. I said d8, I meant to, you know, like as the arrows show. That's not the way to do this. Here's an interesting idea. Right? My opponent doesn't want to lose his rook. So the king has to go back to f6, and that gives us time to pick up the pawn at a6. affect the game. White's sort of nursing this one pawn lead. Queens come off, and white has an advantage due to the doubled rooks, the extra point of material, a passed pawn, another pawn that isn't passed but is strong nonetheless. These are some of the best moves available. Just trying to press and press and press, and now white has the last long range piece, or the last piece. We'll play this out too. I'm going to probably try to keep my bishop where it is and let black's pawn movement force departures from its station. For instance, if it gets hairy around here that one of these, if it gets hairy around here that one of these pawns are gonna maybe promote here, then we can help defend via bishop to b1. These are same colored pawns. Pawns of the same color square and side of the game. On the other hand, the white bishop is also doing very well on d3, because if black moves pawn to g5 to get some kind of storm going, then white can capture on h7, and if black moves pawn to h5, then white can play bishop takes g6. These pawn moves to try to get something going on the queen side, king side. These pawn moves to try to get something going on the king side aren't looking that good. So anyway, we're gonna play this out against computer. We are against computer. Okay, good. Then king e7. My opponent played. Make my king more active and keep these as sleepers that could become queens later, or I could push these pawns as part of a kingside attack or kingside placement of pawns, really, to try to control these guys. I think an active king is the way to go. I like king f3, for instance. And now we're gonna place some pawns. Take the opposition. So you can see this sort of thematically. The white king is going to rush towards the queen side, and black cannot make progress against h5 because of the bishop on e2. here's the board as was played against some kind of mistake, and then I finished against the computer on maximum. But I don't think I took any moves back, and I didn't use any hints. So it's sort of cataloging in my mind. Is this game, this game that came out to however many moves, is this a good representation of my playing strength or not? Since I didn't use hints or take any moves back, then it's a pretty good representation of a slightly slower version of my chess play than my blitz play. It's a good representation nonetheless. I'll take that. That's pretty good. This was okay. What's this? Which game was this? The white pieces. Oh, yeah, this isn't a good representation because mostly when did I insert a best move where I had made a blunder or something like that? Trying to get a grip on my move 29, King F2. Okay, so this is as it were in the game, and I finished this out definitely without much difficulty. So, yeah, I'm really proud that I had as high as 91% accuracy, and Black had 84% accuracy. This is a great game of chess. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm More Gravity. Have a great afternoon.